Hello, I'm Jack Fink, and you're watching Eye on Politics on CBS News, Dallas-Fort Worth. Election Day is about a month away, and if you haven't registered to vote yet, you've only got a few more days until October 11th to do so. As of now, the Secretary of State reports that there are more than 17.6 million registered voters in Texas. That's about 660,000 more than were registered to vote in the November 2020 election, and 1.8 million more than were registered to vote in the last midterm election in November 2018. The Texas governor's race is the marquee race this year, and both candidates, two-term incumbent Republican Greg Abbott and his Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke, are touting their get-out-to-vote operations.
How's everybody doing today?
At the University of North Texas, Democrat Beto O'Rourke urged more than 400 students to vote.
36 days from when this contest is going to be decided, arguably the most important election in the United States of America today.
O'Rourke says his campaign stop here at UNT in Dallas is the start of his final push to get out the vote for Election Day.
2, 3, fantastic!
He said they're activating 90,000 volunteers across the state and will knock on 5 million doors by Election Day. On Saturday, Governor Abbott said he knocked on his campaign's 3 millionth door in Harlingen. He credited thousands of his campaign volunteers.
This is a campaign for you.
O'Rourke told students talking to others is more powerful than a TV ad or a tweet. And he told me it's crucial to his campaign.
This is our moment of truth. And I'm convinced that these young people are going to be the margin of victory. This is how we're going to win.
I'm literally so excited.
Isabella Ariola, a junior here, said she just met O'Rourke and will vote for him. And she plans to talk to other students.
And even if they're not going to vote for who I want them to vote for, it's still important for that everyone has a voice and that voting is so important.
Economic burden.
O'Rourke's appearance comes after he butted heads against Governor Abbott over abortion, the border, and guns, among other issues in their one and only debate Friday night. With Abbott leading in recent polls by 7 to 8 percentage points, analysts say O'Rourke has to appeal to new voters and those who haven't decided yet whether to go to the polls. Governor Abbott and O'Rourke butted heads on a variety of issues in their one and only debate last week. Aaron Jones has the highlights.
Thank you, Governor Abbott.
After months of campaigning against each other, tonight Governor Greg Abbott and his Democratic opponent Beto O'Rourke appeared on the same stage.
I think the debate is important so that voters can be educated about the stance that politicians take on the issues that they will represent us for.
A new Quinnipiac poll released this week shows Abbott with a lead of 7 percentage points over O'Rourke, the Texas-Mexico border noted as the most urgent concern for Texas voters. The first 10-plus minutes of the debate was devoted to this topic, with billions of dollars already going to Operation Lone Star's border security initiative. One question that was posed to the leading candidates: should more money be allocated towards the program?
Candidly, we shouldn't have to allocate any money for it because this is all because of Joe Biden's failure to do the president's job to secure the border.
No, it's clearly failed. The numbers are in. We're seeing not fewer but more engagements at our border.
Polling shows abortion is also high among voters, also addressed tonight.
As it concerns abortion, Beto's position is the most extreme because he not only supports abortion of a fully developed child to the very last second before birth, he's even against providing medical care for a baby who survives an abortion.
That's not true. It's completely a lie. I never said that, and no one thinks that in the state of Texas. This election is about reproductive freedom. If you care about this, you need to turn out and vote. I will fight to make sure that every woman in Texas can make her own decisions about her own body.
Now, with the candidates going their separate ways again, the decision is left to voters.
Who will control the next Congress? Historically, the political party not in the White House makes big gains in Congress in the midterm elections. For months now, Republicans have been favored to regain the majority, but Democrats are hoping that won't happen. We recently interviewed Republican Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne of the 24th Congressional District here in North Texas about the House Republicans' newly proposed Commitment to America.
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't necessarily Kevin McCarthy's commitment to America. All of our Congress members worked on it for the last 2 years. I was put on a task force dealing with healthcare when I was first elected, and it's one thing that we have all been working on. And I was in Pittsburgh on Monday when we released it. And I think what it does is it shows a sharp contrast to what Democrats are prioritizing and what Republicans are prioritizing. I've been in the district. I've talked to small business owners. I've talked to parents. I've talked to taxpayers. And what we've seen is it's the economy, it's inflation, it's border security. It's what parents are learning, about what their kids are learning in schools and wanting to take back control of their kids' education, and recognizing that all of us are individuals moving forward on that. And it's just a very sharp contrast to what Democrats are offering. So I was there. It gives an outline of what we're going to do. There's much more specifics, as we move forward. There's been thousands of bills that Republicans have introduced over the last session that haven't made their way out of committee. So hopefully in November, when we win the election, control of the House, and in January, when Republicans take control, we will be able to get these things out of committee and on the floor of the House and being able to pass them. And I think that will do a wonderful benefit to not only the country, but specifically to North Texas, where we see energy jobs, where we see small businesses that are faltering under this economy.
So you mentioned a lot of topics. I'm just wondering, as far as what will this do? This is a guide for Republicans and for Americans on how Republicans would govern. So what are the main, obviously you don't have bill details, but you do have, details on a framework. And so what are the main takeaways on those?
So we're looking at the economy and making sure that we are empowering employees and employers to be able to get out of the red tape of overregulations. We are looking at being on the economy as well, on opening it up, on making sure that we are not putting more and more excess fees and costs, debt on top of debt, which is what we have seen over the last 2 years with one-party rule. We're talking about, again, looking at freedoms and having a future that's free, which means not burdening us all in debt that we can't pay for. It means allowing the open economy to actually work. We're looking at holding our government accountable, making sure that elected officials aren't treated any different way than any of us. We're all supposed to be, on the same equal par, and we haven't seen that in the last couple of years. It's making sure that your government officials are held accountable. It's looking at safety. We have seen crime rising in all of our communities across the country. It is supporting our police. It is encouraging them to get into that line of career of law enforcement. It is also looking at what's happening at our border. And instead of hiring 87,000 IRS agents to harass our small businesses, maybe hiring other people at our Customs and Border Protection and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement to make sure that our laws are being held and our communities are being safe.
I saw Speaker Pelosi tweeted, and she called the Republican plan, she described it this way: abortion bans, higher drug prices, weaken democracy. What's your response to that?
I think she needs to learn how to read, because if she can show me where that is in our commitment to America, it doesn't exist. So I think the speaker, likes to talk about what she doesn't know, and she likes to flash out things that aren't existing. But that's not in the bill. That's not in the commitment at all.
And she described the Democrats' plans as lower costs, better paying jobs, safer communities. What's your thought about that?
Well, I'd ask people to see what they've seen with their own eyes over the last 2 years, and not what this administration and Speaker Pelosi are saying. Believe what you see, not what they say. Because if you look at that, at what's happened in our, really, do we feel like we've had safer streets? Over the last several years, where Democrats have been decrying the police, have been trying to defund the police, have been demonizing our law enforcement, I haven't seen decreases in crime. I've seen increases in crime. where we've had bills that they have prioritized that are increasing our debt, that are increasing the burden that every single American is going to have to pay in the future. That has not helped our economy. They've only helped to slow our economy, to slow our labor. And as far as what they've done with our wages, when you've got inflation that has gone up 8.3%, that's basically taking an entire month's salary out of any working American. So I would argue that what she says is absolutely not what they're doing, doing the exact opposite.
What would the solution be to high inflation under a Republican-led House?
Well, first, it's not shutting down businesses. It's not shutting down employment opportunities. For example, during the first day of the Biden administration, when they shut down the Keystone Pipeline and ended 11,000 jobs, it's getting back to energy independence and energy confidence in our businesses. It's allowing businesses to be able to actually get financial need when they need it. And not demonizing entire U.S. companies, is which we've seen under this administration and under one-party Democrat rule. We have seen it repeatedly. And again, I haven't seen a plan. Nancy Pelosi says that they have a plan. Where is it? Where is the plan for border security? Because it hasn't come up. We haven't had the border czar go down, to our borders and actually talk to the people who have been running our borders for years, who can tell her very clearly, this is the tools that we need. We were using the Remain in Mexico policy, which helped us to partner with our, country to our immediate south, where all of these folks are coming in, including 5 times as many potential people on our terrorist list as the entire Trump administration 4 years prior, 5 years prior. That's an issue, but they don't have a plan for that. What are you doing to actually get more police officers on the street? They don't have a solution for that. What are they doing to give people more support other than just spending more money? We have not seen that prioritized. Instead, we go to DC and we talk about these PC issues, these woke issues that aren't going to help the economy, aren't going to help working Americans, and quite honestly are just a distraction from them not doing their job.
Well, how does the Republican plan respond to the border crisis? I mean, because ultimately this is Congress's job to deal with immigration, and we haven't seen any plan that is being put in place. And so I'm wondering, what are the Republicans, if elected into the majority, what are you going to do about it?
I mean, you're right. We haven't seen a plan for the last 2 years. Governor Newsom was saying that it was Congress's responsibility to pass it. They've had one-party rule. You've had the House, you've had the Senate, you've had the presidency. Why aren't you calling up the Democrat Party and saying, where's your plan? Our plan is to go back to the tools that were working. Our plan is to actually work with our folks in Central America and figure out, okay, we need to hold you accountable when you're having these massive amounts of people flood our border. Work with them. So that was the Remain in Mexico policy. We also had the First Safe Country policy. That was working. We need to make sure that we, instead of doing the catch and release and having our border protection folks act as cab drivers and babysitters, that they can do their job, which means deporting people that should not be here under Immigration and Customs Enforcement. If you've committed a crime, you need to be deported. If you are in this country illegally, you need to be deported. Enforcing our laws, that's one thing that we can do. And again, instead of hiring the 87,000 IRS agents to harass our small businesses, we can take those funds and put them into protecting our border. Because what we've seen is a lot of resources being stripped away from the border, those tools being taken out of their toolbox. Repair that, the problems that we've seen over the last 2 years, repair those issues, put those tools back into place and give them the resources that they need. We've been down at the border. We have seen number of times massive amounts of people coming over with no plan. They get picked up by Customs and Border Protection agents. They're brought to a location, they're put on a bus, and they are sent into our country. We have no idea where they're going. We're not being notified, and we have no idea whether or not they're ever even making their court dates. And in a number of instances, they're not even given a court date. They're just brought into this country, released, and then we never hear about it again. It's not a plan. Republicans are looking at enforcing our laws, giving the resources that they need, and going down and actually talking to those border protection agents who can tell you exactly what they need. Also, which includes finishing the wall. That was something that was working. When you talk to cities, when you talk to ranch owners, when you talk to, working families that live along that border, they appreciated the fact that the last administration was prioritizing their security, and they've just seen it run rampant. It's sickening, it's saddening when you go down there and you talk to people about what they're living through every single day. It's sickening. People who own land, they can't even appreciate being at home, because if they don't let people in and give them food, water, shelter, clothing, their houses get broken into. People who have to now walk around their property with guns and dogs because they don't feel safe. That's not an America that we should be living in.
A couple more questions. Abortion access. Recently, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina announced his plan, his bill for a 15-week abortion ban nationally. Where are you on that specifically?
I have always said that I think that there was a grave error made by the Supreme Court over 40 years ago when they decided that that was their responsibility to take up abortion at the federal level. I strongly believe that states have that right to be able to decide on their own, to listen to all of their constituents, to have that be a public debate, a transparent discussion. That's where that belongs, as opposed to having a federal mandate or federal minimum. Now, one of the things that I've been trying to do, we're drafting legislation that would support women who are having a baby but want to put it up for adoption. So it would allow adoptive families the ability to be able to put the birthing mother on their insurance. I think we need to show compassion. I think we need to understand that women who are caught in those positions are, have a lot in front of them, and they need support, they need compassion, and they need help. Those types of bills I'm totally supportive of. But the bill that we saw on the floor just a few months ago that every single Democrat but one voted for shows the extreme nature of what what Democrats want to support for a nationwide abortion policy. And that is a taxpayer-funded abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. And I think if you have those discussions in California, they may call that abortion. I think if you have those conversations in Texas, they'd call it infanticide. So the states need to have that conversation. We can do what we can at the state level to provide support, at the federal level to provide support. But this is a very sensitive topic to many for obvious reasons, as opposed to just coming down with the extremes on the Democrat side. I think we need to have that conversation. It needs to be in the states.
And my last question to you is regarding the student debt relief. The Congressional Budget Office just came out and announced it'll cost $400 billion. Other estimates have said it's higher.
Yeah.
And I'm
Other estimates
wondering,
have said it's $1 trillion. Yeah.
yes. And so I'm wondering, the fact that the president signed this already, are you among those Republicans who are trying to stop it or are thinking about filing a lawsuit, et cetera?
Well, definitely lawsuits are going to be filed. Whether or not I'm the one to file it, I doubt it. There's going to be a lot of folks who are going to file it for obvious reasons. The president does not have the power of the purse that relies on Congress. We're talking about $400 billion to $1 trillion cost. And if there's anybody that should be working right now, anybody who can actually get a job, it's those folks when you get out of college. 10 years is usually how long it takes to pay back your loans. Those loans are 10-year loans. So you're looking at people in their mid-20s to their mid-30s with college degrees. Those folks need to get to work. They need to be able to pay back their loans. I did it. I can't tell you how many other people did it, but you're looking at such a small number of our population, and the number that is not in that group that I would consider vulnerable. We've got a lot of people who have disabilities, a lot of people who are elderly. We look at our vets, and our resources need to go to help them, not people who went to college, didn't realize what they were signing, even though they were getting a college degree. And it needs to be passionate to those folks who need it the most. And we just cannot keep spreading our resources around to buy votes. And that's apparently what the Biden administration is trying to do with this stunt.
Congresswoman Beth Van Duyne of the 24th Congressional District, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Great to see you again.
Now we hear from Democratic Congressman Mark VEASEY of the 33rd Congressional District in North Texas about the message and policies that Democrats are running on this year.
Obviously, anytime you have an election, you're concerned about that, right? Both sides want to be in the majority. We're doing everything that we can to make sure that we remain in the majority. Particularly right now, we really do need a party that's going to put democracy above politics. And so it's clear that the Democratic Party is the party for protecting democracy and things like the peaceful transition of elections when people win or lose. And so we want to make sure we keep the majority. There are a lot of races out there that are competitive, a couple here in Texas and around the country as well. The congressional generic battleground polls have really tightened. Before, the Republicans had a pretty wide lead a couple of months ago, but now they've tightened. And I think that we have a great chance of retaining the majority. I think that we have a great message to sell to the American public. That is, again, protecting democracy, making sure that none of the mess that you saw on January the 6th happens again, making sure that women have the same healthcare freedoms as men do and other people do in this country. And we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to keep the economy turned around. And so absolutely, we think that we have a good message and we want to keep it that way.
I wanted to ask you, as you know, that the House Republicans have proposed their commitment to America. Do the Democrats have something similar for voters to, measure?
The Republicans, if they have a commitment to America, they have to prove that they're for democracy. And when you have a former president that says, no, I was cheated, when it's clear that he was not cheated, then if you're not willing to stand up to that, then your slogan means nothing. Your slogan is just a bunch of BS. And so for me to hear the Republicans even say something like that or come up with this, cleverly written 3-word slogan, I honestly think it's a joke. And I don't think that we need to counter that. But we do have a message, and that is people over politics. Again, standing up for democracy, making sure that we invest in education, making sure that we're doing everything we can to get the economy in the right way that we want it to be for all citizens. And so I think that we're putting people over politics, and I think that our agenda, if you look at what we've already passed, and you look at the things that we propose, that it's much better than the Republicans' empty slogan where they say a commitment to America, but then they allow crazy Fidel Castro like we're not going to turn over the keys to the White House over to the opposition type behavior like we saw on January the 6th, and they just let that type of thing run wild. It's a joke for them to even come up with some commitment, for them to come up with some sort of slogan like that. It is an absolute joke.
So let me ask you about the economy, because this seems to be still top of everybody's mind. Inflation, and particularly, we're seeing 40-year highs. And yes, gas prices have come down, but the cost of food has not. And a lot of people, wonder if it ever will. And so I'm wondering, what is the Democrats' prescription, if you will, to get inflation under control?
Again, people over politics. One area where Republicans continue to fail this country repeatedly when it comes to bringing down prices, when it comes to things like food security, energy security, other areas where they completely just drop the ball over and over and over, is immigration reform. We passed an immigration reform bill. Republicans are doing, gimmicks around immigration, like using buses. If you're talking about bringing down food prices, you have to do something about immigration reform. If you're talking about bringing down energy prices in this country, guess who produces energy? Go to the Permian Basin right now. I urge any of the viewers out there, go to the Permian Basin and look at who is working in the oil and gas fields. It's mainly immigrants. If you don't want to do anything about immigration reform, then you're a joke on the economy. And again, if you're serious about putting people over politics, then Republicans will work with Democrats and pass the immigration reform bill that we've already passed in the House, and tell the senators, hey, get this to President Biden's office so we can get this economy turned around. And right now, they're playing games. It's a bunch of gimmicks. You see what DeSantis is doing with buses. You see what Greg Abbott is doing with buses. They're trying to, sort of outdo each other around this, issue. And it's a joke. We have more jobs in Texas than we have people. So if we don't do anything about immigration reform, the economic picture, particularly here in our state, is going to, not improve anytime soon. And if we don't do something about immigration reform, because Texas is such a large state and California is such a large state, states that have large populations of immigrants, then then you're not serious about that issue. And so, yeah, let's fix the economy. But the way how you do that is you pass the immigration reform bill that Democrats have already passed.
So I did want to touch on that subject, but if I may just continue on inflation. And there is some school of thought that government spending has caused the inflation. And so we've seen a lot of increases in government spending. And so I'm wondering, what is your take on that? What is your response to that? Because the Republicans have said it, that the more the government keeps spending, the harder it is to lower inflation.
They weren't saying that when Trump was president. He was spending money at beatnik speed. And I never heard any Republican in this delegation, in the North Texas delegation, say that. I never heard any Republican on Capitol Hill say that. I never heard Steve Scalise. I never heard Kevin McCarthy. I never heard Mitch McConnell. I never heard John Cornyn say that. Never heard Ted Cruz say that. The entire time that Donald Trump was spending money at a record pace. I mean, this guy, Donald Trump, was spending money faster than Carl Lewis ran in the 80 Olympics, in the 80-something Olympics. And I never, ever heard them say one thing. And so again, when they say silliness like that, people really need to come at them, and they need to be countered, whether they're on Fox, whether they're on OAN, well, I don't care what they're on. When they say crazy things like that, people need to say, why didn't you say anything when Donald Trump was spending money at a record pace and giving billionaires tax cuts? And I never heard that addressed. And so I think that the biggest upward pressures that we're seeing on prices, on inflation, is that we have a lack of workers. We need more workers in this country. Obviously, again, we have more people, we have more jobs in Texas than we have people. And so that's one area where we can help get inflation under control. Obviously, we have a lot of supply chain issues that continue to cause problems. I think that President Biden is doing everything he can. You look at large retailers, other companies, CEOs of these businesses, and they're saying that President Biden has taken all the right steps needed in order to get the supply chain issue fixed as quickly as possible. And so again, to me, that's putting people over politics and not just a bunch of rhetoric like we hear on the Republican side.
And as far as spending is concerned, I mean, obviously with COVID, there was a lot of spending, trillions of dollars since then. Do you grow concerned about the national debt at all?
Yeah, I think that we're all concerned about the national debt, and it's something that we should continue to be concerned about. We need to look for ways that we can reduce the national debt. And again, I'm willing to work across the aisle to get that done. I think that for most of the Democrats in our caucus, it is something that we consider a priority. And we want to help people, but we certainly want to do everything we can to reduce the national debt. Absolutely.
And do you see that as higher taxes? Do you see that as lower spending? How do you see that?
A lot of people have a lot of different ideas on how you do that. Again, if people want to make that a priority, as I think that it should be, let's sit down and talk about that. Obviously, we had a lot of emergencies around COVID that needed to be dealt with. We're dealing with inflationary issues right now, but absolutely, there are a lot of people have a lot of different ideas on how to do that. Let's sit down together and try to work something out. I think that's what the American public wants. I think that's what most Texans want.
And then going back to what you were talking about, immigration.
Yeah.
As you know, and we've talked about this before, it's Congress's job to get an immigration bill passed or to make any changes.
Which we did. We passed in the House. Absolutely.
And so I'm wondering if if you believe there's any way that Republicans and Democrats could come together, just as they did on this gun safety after Uvalde. Do you think there's any room for that? Do you think that there's any possibility for that, where even if it's, I mean, are there areas in which that Republicans and Democrats disagree that are held up because there are other areas in which they disagree?
I think that it would be tough right now. I mean, you look at what's happening right now between Governor Abbott and DeSantis, and they're both in this sort of contest to not let one another, be mean to the immigrant one another. You know what I mean? Like they're in this contest to see, who can be mean, who can be the meanest to the immigrants. And
they're not. They're players outside of Congress. I mean, they're governors who they still have to maneuver within federal law. And so, federal law is set by Congress.
Yeah,
and so
that's absolutely right.
Is there any, I mean, obviously Texas has, the second largest congressional delegation in the United States.
Right.
Has there been any effort, within the delegation to try to, have conversations and expand them?
Well, here's the problem. I mean, you're absolutely right. We passed the bill. The Democrats have passed the bill. We put people over politics, and we passed an immigration reform bill that's looking for 60 votes in the Senate. Of course, we only have 50 votes in the Senate, but we passed an immigration reform bill that is ready to go to help out in this situation. The reason why it's important to watch people like DeSantis, the reason why it's important to watch people like Greg Abbott is that the congressional delegation actually looks to Greg Abbott to give them cover. And that's not just Greg Abbott, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, the state legislature, both in the House and the Senate in Austin, and the congressional delegation. They're looking for that nod. They're looking for that nod from someone that has a high profile, national profile, to give them the nod to say, hey, it's time that Republicans, again, put people over politics and do something about immigration reform. And so when you see this sort of maneuvering back and forth between DeSantis and between Abbott, it's discouraging, because that is exactly the sentiment of Republicans in Congress. Once you see them change, and once you see them wanting to do the right thing and stop playing, games with people's lives, then you'll see Democrats and Republicans come together to work out a deal. But right now, the sentiment on Capitol Hill is that there's not enough cover from national leaders, be it Trump, be it Abbott, be it DeSantis, for us to move, because they are scared.
I do want to ask you one other question, and I appreciate your time, Congressman, and that is about abortion access. And I'm wondering, do you think that this is, I know House Democrats passed a bill that's not going to make it through the Senate. And talk to me a little bit about, how you think that's possible, or is it something that's really just going to have to be left up to the states?
First of all, let's be 100% clear about something. The entire quote unquote pro-life movement is really a ruse for a lot of other topics that people aren't really comfortable talking about on the conservative side of the aisle, probably issues around things like race and what have you. And so they're using this issue of abortion to sort of hide behind. And so for Democrats, it's important that we do everything we can to prioritize this issue so we can start getting women reproductive healthcare rights and start giving them those same freedoms that they had before this ruling.
Democratic Congressman Mark VEASEY of Fort Worth, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jack.
My colleague Ken Molestina spoke with CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarlane about the balance of power in Congress.
If you think you're seeing a lot of campaign ads in Texas, you should move to Georgia or Pennsylvania and experience the tidal wave there, because those two states are viewed as the epicenter of the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. And candidates are pressing any number of issues over and over and over again on the air. Democrats are trying to press the issue of abortion rights, the fragility of abortion rights after the Supreme Court ruling, and trying to talk about climate change and the economy. Republicans are also trying to win on the economy and outflank Democrats, but also trying to introduce the idea that the border, the immigration issue, the migrants from Texas and elsewhere are pressing national concern. We'll see which side prevails, but we know in the narrowly divided U.S. Senate, 50-50 split with the vice president breaking ties, any one of these competitive Senate races across the country could flip the balance of power and impact the next 2 years of the Biden presidency.
Yeah, we know Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been busing migrants to sanctuary cities. Is the issue of immigration going to be dominant heading into Election Day, or will it be more of an issue, you think, for Congress starting in January?
Republicans are trying to raise that issue, make it more prominent and make it more profound in many races.